whenever I talk about a suitable, or like a legitimate, how do you call it, receiver, or how do you call it, influencer, is this person, you will hear this story and then you can decide what it is like. So William Sturgis Bigelow is an American physician, like a medical doctor, from Boston. His family was really established family in Boston, and his parents used to collect French painting. If you go to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, you will see a huge collection from the Bigelow's parents. But anyhow, he liked the Japanese culture very much, and in 1870s he had an opportunity to serve in Japan, like a, as a as a delegate from the United States. So he lived there several years, but he was a very intellectual man, so he learned Japanese, and then he also studied Buddhism, so he became a Buddhist monk in 1870s. So this is one photograph of Bigelow in Japanese travel clothes, and this we've seen sometimes in the ukiyo-e prints, right? These are oil-coated, hemp cloth, so that it's a water repellent. And then he has this big walking stick, so he would go anywhere, everywhere. And he saved many ruined temples or lost artistic traditions. And there are some other people as well. So what do you think of him transform himself in this Japanese lifestyle, learning Japanese, and trying to accomplish his level of understanding in Buddhism? Is this another case of cultural appropriation? Well, here it's very clear, it's totally not, right? Like, I mean, you cannot really tell him that he is culturally appropriating. Here, this is another famous Boston family member. His name is Charles Longfellow. Is Longfellow familiar to you? His father, Charles Longfellow's father, was a very famous poet from Boston again. So Longfellow and Bigelow, they were old friends. So Longfellow went to Japan in the 70s, and then he dresses as a kabuki actor here. He dressed as a samurai, and he liked Japanese culture so much that what did he do? He even got a tattoo on his back. And I always, present both Bigelow and Longfellow. And what Longfellow is doing is very typical of a non-Asian tourist in Asian country. He wants to show himself in these various clothes for the sake of his family. But then he liked the culture so much that he got the beautiful, do you see the carp here? Beautiful fish carp tattoo on him. So in this case, he picked up just one segment of Japanese culture, and then he really liked it and like embodied it. But this is a little borderline suspicious. Like Bigelow, he's a reserved man. Like he's a kind of it's just for his own pleasure, and we happen to have these images. But Longfellow's case, Japanese culture was something of a novelty, and then he bought a lot of souvenirs and saved these photographs, and he went back home and then he decorated one of his room in Japanese style. You can even visit it, Longfellow's house in Boston. So I think in Longfellow's case, he was young at the time, and he was fascinated by a new culture. But what he's doing is a classic example of borderline appropriation. Did he have a deep understanding of Japanese culture? Not so much. Like it was a phase in his life, and then he moved on. So something to think about. And then if you go to here, this man, obviously the man, Theophilus Alexander Singleton, he lived in Japan for quite some time, and he had a business. He's like a international trader, and this is his business associate that he hired. So here he created image of himself and his associate, and then he created carte de visite. But carte de visite is a sort of a business card. So that in his case, because he's living in Japan and doing business with the Japanese people, it was his way of acculturation. Do you know the word called acculturation? Like, for example, you originally came from Mexico when you were young, but you lived here for so long that people don't really recognize you as a Mexican, more as a American, like, let's say, citizen. So all of us, if we go to another country and live there, eating their food, like that new community's food, and then listening to their music, and maybe if you go to their school system, what we are going through is called acculturation. So people like Theophilus Alexander Singleton, in his case, this is a mode of acculturation. Because he has to blend in with this host culture. So there are various contexts. And then there is also this famous scholar. His name is Frederick Starr. And he looks like this. So he taught anthropology at University of Chicago. And almost like a Bigelow's case, Frederick Starr speaks Japanese. He also collects Japanese folkloric tales. And when it comes to his subject matter of Japanese folkloric tales, he would know more than any other Japanese people. So he visited Japan quite often. And in it, he is going to dress himself in Japanese. This is more like a decent Japanese upper middle class attire. And then he also knows how to participate in tea ceremonies, or sit down like this, in a very with the legs kneeling and speaking Japanese. But here, what is also interesting is, so Frederick Starr, from Japanese government's example, he was an asset. Do you know the word called asset? It was a very good example of non-Asian people loving their own culture. So Frederick Starr was often asked to dress in kimono, and his photographs were often carried or reprinted in newspapers. And that is, for the Japanese government's perspective, to show off how powerful their culture is. Japanese government, for Japanese government to reinforce, in a way, like a nationalistic values. Do you understand this point? Like, this is not Frederick Starr's own, how can I say, own idea. He didn't want to promote his image as a Japan lover. He was a scholar. In a way, his position was neutral, but he simply understood Japanese culture really well. But the Japanese government wanted to show Frederick Starr in various Japanese costumes to show their citizens that Japanese culture is very much respected and well loved by non-Japanese people. Do you see this government perspective?